Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. Ukraine War News Update, the first part thereof for the 18th of September 2024. If you don't include my breaking news update concerning the Toropets massive explosion detonation strike at the ammo depot 500 kilometers into Russia, go and check out my breaking news update if you haven't already. Good cup of tea to keep me company. Right, okay. Other than you guys, you keep me company. Let's look at the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, and we have seen that several days of much lower figures across a number of the categories. The personnel losses are still always between 1,000 and 1,300, and even though we've seen slightly lower, as in the lower 1,000s, still really significant and above, I think, what they can recruit. So remember, I talked about 30,000 a month being the figure that Russians claim they're recruiting every month, and yet Putin put out a decree that he's going to expand the size of the army by 180,000. Now, just to give you the heads up that last time they put a decree like that out, I think, I was watching Joe Blogg's video and he was talking about this. Last time he did that, they followed it with, so the decree says we're going to expand the army, and then they follow it with a general kind of mobilization, or semi-general, however you want to see it, a form of mobilization. We might see at some point in the near distant future a Russian mobilization, which is both what we've been worrying about, but also what you kind of want in a way. You want to attrit the Russians so much so that they are forced to do a general mobilization. And the last general mobilization was so unpopular that they didn't want to do another one. So if you're forcing their hand, this could lead to repercussions in the social political field that could lead to an unraveling of the Kremlin administration, or it could lead to massive, as the last one did, massive economic impact by drawing those people from the population, taking them from working positions that then have to be filled, and you already have a labour shortfall. You have a lack of supply of labour, causing the wages to go up in order to attract people to positions. So the Russian army, or the Russian economy, would see inflation from those wage increases. They would be unable to fill a lot of those jobs. It might affect productivity, and you're taking all those people often from the private sector and you're putting them into very well paid, initially well paid, because they're having to attract people with higher wages to bring them into the armed forces. So you're taking them from private sector wages, often putting them entirely on public sector wages that are very good wages. So it's incredibly expensive, and that then it means that they are unable to spend that money on welfare and on education, on healthcare. That then means society starts crumbling, and people get annoyed that, why are we having this incredibly expensive war? Why have you taken my family away from me to serve in the war? And why is my hospital crumbling and the school crumbling, and etc., etc.? We can't afford textbooks. Then people have more reasons than just a war to get angry. This is like a good thing for the Ukrainians, that you might see a mobilization, even though the mobilization is the only way that Russia can have any hope of sustaining their war effort. And so the bad news is they'll be able to bring, if they can successfully mobilize that many people, they'll be able to bring 180,000 people to the front. However, that also means that they have to find equipment for 180,000 people. Where are all those uniforms? Where's all that equipment like guns and ammunition? Where are they getting their training? Who's training them? How long are they going to get to be trained, etc., etc.? There are loads of implications that need to be considered when the Russians have to consider mobilizing it on a massive scale. Anyway, 1,130, all of that came from personnel losses are high and they're above replacement rates. 6 tanks is still below the daily average. 3 troop-carrying AFVs is very, very low. 25 artillery systems is low. It's slightly above what it was yesterday, which is below average. 45 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 18 pieces of special equipment. That's weirdly high in that category, but it's easy to do that. So it has a lower number of pieces of equipment in that usually. So there you go. It's not the worst day by any stretch for the Russians, but they're still losing well over 1,000 personnel in a day. We are seeing quite a few videos coming out again of Russians being captured in the Kursk region. This is important because we saw that initially. So the Ukrainians invaded into Kursk. They took loads of territory really quickly. The Russians pretty much capitulated, saw loads and loads of POWs get taken. And then it all sort of ground to a halt where the Russians started putting in defensive forces and then did a counterattack. And now we've seen the Ukrainians counter, and we're starting to see POW videos. I saw about 3 or 4 videos yesterday. Not huge numbers, just the odd 1 or 2 here, but I think it's reflective. You kind of get a sense of what's going on by what you find on social media. It seems odd, but that's kind of what I do, what we do. And you get a sense of it being a reflection of activities. And I think you are seeing more of an attacking. I think the Russian attack has somewhat ground down to being much more slow moving up into Kursk region, and the Ukrainians are trying to regain that initiative by doing their own sort of counters. Just a bit of footage, to not apropos to any bit of news or anything that's happened in the last 24 hours, but when we talk about carb 500s, 1,000s, 1,500, maybe even 3,000. This is a crater from a 1,500 kilogram bomb, and it is huge. Like, don't underestimate the power of these bombs when they smack into buildings and into positions. This is why trenches don't last very long when they're hammered. This is why Avdiivka didn't last very long when it was hammered by guided glide bombs. They are huge in comparison to, say, a mortar round or a 152, 155 mil shell. Okay, we're going to just dip into Covert Cabal's latest video. Go and check out the video. Always good for giving a sense of how much equipment the Russians have left in deep storage as they pore over these satellite images with a fine-tooth comb. This is towed artillery.
And finally, the total numbers. Here they are. Our total pre-war count, there were some 14,486 pieces of towed artillery of all types. Now, it's down to just 6,134. It should be noted though that a decent number of those come from mortars, which, depending on different definitions, might not be counted. So if we ignore them, it's 11,876 down to that same 6,134, as we haven't seen any remaining mortars. Most of them were stored at the 94th in Omsk, but those are all gone now. For the total breakdown of each type, you'll have to check in with HIMARS on Twitter. He put in a massive amount of work on this project, and a huge thanks to him. He's broken them down into each type at each base for pre-war, 2023, and current. He's also broken them down and grouped them by size to get a better and quicker idea of the situation. And you'll have to check his Twitter to get a better explanation of that. But one key takeaway from this is that they're quickly burning through all their larger artillery. While over 50% remain of the small and medium, only about 1/3 remain of those larger ones. And these tend to be the newer, more accurate and capable ones, like the 2A36 and 2A65 built in the 70s and 80s, compared to the much older and less capable 1940s and 50s built D1 and D20 in our medium category. There's several reasons for this.
Okay, so just to recap there, although 50% left of non-mortar artillery in general sounds pretty good, you are going to be taking your best artillery first, and what will be left is either unusable or is to be cannibalized, or so on and so forth. It's not ideal. It requires longer amounts of time to refurbish and more money and more resources. So they're taking their bigger, better artillery first, and that in that category, the larger artillery, they only have 1/3 left. So they've gone through 2/3 in 2 years. You would expect with another year, well, that's all they would have left is another year, but that third that's left is not going to give you the same number of pieces as the previous 2/3 over the previous two and a half years. So yeah, and also it means you're going to get down to more and more of these smaller bits of artillery, such as the D1, the D20, D30.
Obviously, they want to pick the best and most capable first. That means pulling those newer pieces from storage when they're replacing losses, or scrapping for spare parts like their barrels, or most importantly, in forming new units. Russia has created some 70 new regiments since the war began, and while their compositions vary, if each had one artillery battalion, which normally consists of 18 pieces, that alone would be 1,260 pieces of artillery, and that would account for nearly 22% of the decline in non-mortar artillery that we've seen. And as you can see, a lot of those large artillery pieces here are no longer neatly packed, but scattered about, as if they're beginning to move them, possibly for use. Also, having 1/3 remaining still sounds like a lot. After all, if it took them over 2 years to burn through the first 2/3, it seemed reasonable to assume that the remaining 1/3 would last at least another year. However, there's a high probability that a lot of those remaining are just junk, and scrap at best. But what this also implies is that as they run out of the newer pieces and have to rely on the older ones, the quality and capability of Russian artillery in Ukraine will decrease dramatically. I mean, some of these, like the D1, was designed and began production all the way back during World War II. Although it is important to note that it will take some time between running out of these somewhat newer equipment and seeing the impact on the battlefield. They have to be prepared, shipped out, sent to units, then lost in combat or worn out from use, before they're replaced with the less capable ones. However, the end result is clear. Russia is going to begin running into a real problem. The real question is if the war and Ukraine will last long enough with sufficient strength to take advantage of that.
There you go. So, as mentioned here, they are approaching crisis points. We often hear about this. You know, there have been many videos and many analyses done of just exactly how long they've got left with different pieces of equipment, different categories of equipment. But it is definitely true that the Russians have exhausted significant stockpiles, deep stockpiles of towed artillery, particularly the large artillery. They are going to be getting closer and closer to that point where they just cannot sustain. Well, I don't think they can sustain those losses. So we are seeing older and older equipment. Goodness me, we've seen lists of D20s and D30s every day on Andrew Perpetua's loss list. We don't yet have an Andrew list for today, but I think they cannot sustain the losses already, but it becomes even more unsustainable as each passing month goes by. Right, when it comes to air distance strike, and standoff munitions, we've got air defense last night intercepting 46 out of 52 Russian drones as they flew into Ukraine. Another wide-scale attack, but another really good day for you, or good night for Ukrainian air defenses, taking out 46 of the 52, and then 5 were lost in location, so I presume electronic warfare, and another one flew back into Russia, which I assume would be something like spoofing. In other words, 100% of the 52 drones were not successful. Russia also attacked with 3 Kh-59-69 missiles. None of them achieved their planned goals. So a good night for the Ukrainians there. Now, we are going to come to Toropets in a second, which is the main subject of kind of this whole video, but I did do my breaking news video on that. As well as Toropets, I think there was quite a wide range of, or quite a number of Ukrainian drones that went into Russia last night. The Russians claim they shot them all down. Don't really know the details because the bandwidth is being strangled with what happened in Toropets. Could be some other significant strikes that took place last night we just don't know about. There could be some good examples of Russian air defense that we don't know about. That I presume there was a fair number of drones. This happened early in the night, right? And this is warehouses with lubricants burning in Yaroslavl in Russia. Now, I don't know if this was a drone strike or what, but anyway, serious burning there. And then we had arrivals in Zelenograd as well. So I presume that is a case of drone strikes there, which is just to the northwest of Moscow. And that's significant in itself. So yeah, I'm sure there's going to be more news on the various strikes that took place outside of the Toropets context. But yeah, good news in with the ones that we have seen so far. If Yaroslavl was a strike, I don't know if it was. Good stuff, and Zelenograd seems to be, as well as in Toropets, which is a massive ammunition depot, as we'll learn. The Ukrainians also yesterday hit an ammunition depot near occupied Mariupol. Now, I don't know if this is news of the previous one. So I reported this and showed you this image of an ammunition depot getting hit near Mariupol the other day. No reports said yesterday afternoon that Ukrainian Navy units destroyed Russian ammunition depots, plural, near Mariupol with a missile strike. The attack eliminated both the infrastructure and large quantities of ammunition stockpiled by Russian forces, according to the Navy. So I think this is going back to talk about that previous strike. However, War Monitor said yesterday afternoon that Ukrainian forces using long-range strikes have hit and destroyed a large ammunition depot. So I don't know if that's a different occurrence to this one, but there was also Sarin talking about this and then putting out some firms data from Mariupol, and that looks pretty. I mean, it's not necessarily all going to be explosions. There could be fires taking place that are just normal kind of, I don't know, house fire or something, or I don't know. But that is, and I don't know what the timescale put on this screen grab is either. But you can see that places are targeted in. This is Mariupol. I presume this kind of activity takes place relatively often, and we don't always hear about it. These are just probably HIMARS strikes. This is why Vuhledar is important, because Vuhledar allows Ukrainians controlling Vuhledar allows the Ukrainians to strike Mariupol with regular ATACMS with 84-kilometer range. If you lose that corner of the front line to the Russians, it means that your HIMARS are pushed back and you are unable to do this unless you use longer ranged, say, ATACMS variants. So interesting that Mariupol has that, but I don't know the details of that screen grab, which is a little bit frustrating. Right, then we're going to go on to Toropets, and my goodness, this was huge. So talking about firms data, what we have is, if we go to the map, and I'll do this very quickly because I've already said this, you've got Ukraine, you've got a strike on Toropets, which is on the same kind of latitude as Moscow, a bit further north indeed, and you have people looking over from here to get a lot of footage of this entire ammunition depot, all of these bunkers. The whole thing appears to have gone up. Or at least largely, some incredible footage of this. And we've got firms data all over that base. So when I say it has all gone up, it really does seem like it's all gone up. It's registered 2.8 on a Richter scale, and with 7 aftershocks. You know, there are some serious explosions going on there. There were, and it's still burning this morning. This is a footage of it this morning, which is incredible. And you can hear those deep rumbles of explosions. Explosions over there, lights going off. And this is like hours and hours and hours after the initial strikes. Now, the Russians have claimed that it was just falling debris from successfully intercepted Ukrainian drones that were taken out by air defense. Of course, that's complete nonsense and just gives you more indications that the Russians can't do anything without lying. Possibly 30,000 tons of ammo going up, windows being blown in from just a massive distance, because this was that significant of a set of explosions. Just the footage coming out there is absolutely incredible. This is the 107th Arsenal, the Russian main missile and artillery directorate in Toropets. And it reportedly contained, I mean, people are variously saying like air defense missiles, even sort of North Korean missiles, as well as Grad rockets, all sorts of different munitions from every conceivable weapon could have been stored there. But yeah, just incredible footage coming from the area. Just lots of cooking off, secondary explosions, etc., etc. and this may have a serious set of ramifications on the Russians in general, in terms of how they're able to prosecute their war. If this is as big an ammunition depot as it appears, then the Russians are going to struggle to have the means to continue doing what they're doing at the rate that they're doing at the moment. There's absolutely no doubt about that. This will have a meaningful effect on their ability to strike Ukrainian forces. Russians in the area complaining that the certain villages are needing to be evacuated. People are waiting on the edge of the river in order to be evacuated, and the village is burned down. The village they're talking about is one called Sikarevo. I would show you that, but as per normal, browsers don't like my mapping. Right, having taken a 45-minute break while the map uploaded and had to do other things, I can't remember what I was talking about when I came to this map. So one of the points about striking this Toropets ammo depot is that you put that together with the strike in Mariupol, and you put that together with no doubt other strikes that the Ukrainians are taking part in, and you get, as you would expect, a systematic approach to trying to degrade the Russian ability to prosecute the war. And I wonder whether they are purposefully going for these ammo depots. And it'd be great if they could hit some factories as well. We saw the Omsk Transmash factory on fire recently. That would be incredibly useful if the Ukrainians are able to just hit the Russians at every kind of element, every point on the process of prosecuting this war, from manufacturing to logistically delivering to storing to using. Everywhere they're getting hit. And of course, it makes you really frustrated that the Ukrainians, even with their hands tied behind their back, are able to do this. They're able to be really quite successful in hammering the Russians at the moment with their own indigenously manufactured drones. Imagine what they could do if they were given the full force of the NATO arsenal and the ability to use it. The Ukrainians here should have won this war already, and it's just so frustrating that they haven't. And the Russians, of course, they're trying to contain this in the information spaces by people like Solovyov saying, hey people, hey mill bloggers, don't spread, nobody should be spreading any pictures of this online. But I'm afraid that cat is well and truly out of the bag. We are seeing, secondary explosions taking place to signify that there is almost certainly surface-to-air missiles here being used. I mean, the heat damage done by these explosions will have been absolutely phenomenal. There is no one going to this base in a hurry, I don't think, and you're not going to see any of that ordnance that may have survived be usable in the foreseeable future. This is going to have an incredible effect on the Russian ability to fire rockets and missiles and shells. At least that's what I would hope. But there you go. We'll see if there's any other news concerning this as the day goes on. If we look at the latest information coming out, I wonder, the Russian town that is now the scene of the munitions depot explosion that could be seen from space this morning just had its municipal district's website changed to feature a photo of Ukrainian intelligence chief Sir Budanov. Ow, that's incredible. So not only have they destroyed the depot itself, but they've changed the website to have a picture of Budanov. That is absolutely prime trolling of the Ukrainians on the Russians there. This is going to be huge news. I'm sure there's a lot more to say about it. I'll keep you posted as and when new information comes out. Right, okay. Somebody's saying it really sounds like a jet engine. Maybe the new Paliancia, the jet drone that the Ukrainians claim that they have manufactured. Wow. If that is the case, if that is what is responsible for starting off the attack, for starting off the explosions at Toropets, then the Ukrainians might well have changed the game somewhat. It could be a case of like, okay, sure, don't allow us to shoot deep into Russia with ATACMS and with Storm Shadow. Here's something that we just knocked up in the garage. Bang. There you go, Toropets. Have some of them apples. So this could be something of a game changer, which is to say we don't need NATO permission. We can do this ourselves. Just give us the money and the ability to scale up the production of this. Give us the raw materials in order to make these rocket drones, and we can do the rest ourselves. Okay, moving on to other bits and pieces. So Tim White says, I must preface this with, it's a report by a Ukrainian unit fighting in Kharkiv, and some may see it as propaganda, but they make a few such claims and it doesn't appear exaggerated. So apparently sickness and poisoning may be occurring among Russia's troops in the region. So this is in the Kharkiv region, Hlyabike. In the area of the settlement of Hlyabike, the enemy is carrying out a single movement of personnel in order to replenish the current shortfall in forward positions. Due to the low quality of food and drinking water at the forward positions of the 11th Tank Regiment of the 18th Motorized Rifle Division, there are mass cases of gastrointestinal disorders among personnel and an urgent need for medication, in connection with which there is a decrease in the level of morale and psychological state occupiers. So, yeah, there you go. The Russians are suffering in many more ways than just, conventional warfare and the death and destruction that follows from that. Diseases, we've heard of cholera taking a hold in the Kherson area previously. Now it seems that gastrointestinal issues in Kharkiv due to a lack of water, food, and conditions being poor. Now, I'm going to talk about something that isn't really that connected to the war in Ukraine, but does make you wonder how Ukraine could do something like this. Would they be able to do anything remotely similar to this? So I almost talked about this yesterday. Just a quick mention of what probably Mossad did with regard to Hezbollah in the Israel conflict, and the 3,000 to 4,000 pages that were used, and they came from a company in Taiwan through Europe, and probably at some point in the supply chain in Europe, they took these pages apart, put explosives in. So Mossad got hold of Hezbollah's communications devices before they were handed over, placed a quantity of PETN, a highly explosive material, on the batteries of the devices and detonated them by raising the temperature of the batteries from afar. Source tells Sky News Arabia. It appears that you buy the pages, you open them up, you replace a battery with one partially filled with RDX and a primer, or PETN or whatever. You connect a primer to the battery, update the software to short circuit the battery to trigger the primer via pager message, package the pages, sell them to the Iranian intel. So simple yet so elegant. However it happened, it appears that these pages went off, they bleeped, and I think that meant that people pulled them off their belt or whatever to look at them, and as a result, many people that were holding these pages when they exploded have suffered eye issues. So 500 Hezbollah members have lost their eyesight as a result of the blast from pager explosions, is one claim. I can't verify that. A doctor who visited hospitals in Sudan, where some of the wounded were taken, said so many people have suffered wounds to their eyes that there is a shortage of eye surgeons, flooded with people who have injured eyes, faces and hands. So these pages have gone off, they've exploded. 3,000 to 4,000 people injured, maybe 10 people dead at the moment, it seems. Now, my mate phoned me this morning to talk about other things, and then he works in logistics and does an awful lot of international flying, and he's like, this will have a massive effect. This is a supply chain issue, and you are going to see, like, you remember when you had the idea that you can make a bomb out of liquid, and so straight away, it was after 9/11, wasn't it? You weren't allowed to take liquids onto a plane. Okay, well now you can make a bomb out of something like a mobile phone. Right, mobile phones and devices are going to have to be checked really super closely on planes now. This could have a knock-on effect for sure in the supply chain of all sorts of things, and the logistics, the manufacturing, the logistics delivery, and so on and so forth. Yeah, going to be interesting to see what the fallout will be to this. But on the kind of military strategic level, this is on the face of it, an incredibly successful, like if you take the human element out of this, an incredibly successful mission project for the Israelis here. You've got the Iranian ambassador being injured. What's he got a Hezbollah pager on him for? Sort of stuff like that. But on the other hand, whenever you attack, injure and kill terrorists, you often create more. I was watching Lioness, the series, special ops series on Paramount Plus. Just signed up for that for a week to see a few things, and ended up watching that series, and that was the last episode was exactly that. It's like, yeah, we've just killed this dude here and that dude there, but how many terrorists have we now made as a result of that? And that is the problem with dealing with terrorists outside of diplomacy. If you are bombing places like Gaza, you are potentially making thousands of new terrorists as you orphan children or kill children and their parents survive. People get angry and they turn to retribution. So it's going to be interesting to see what the fallout will be from this in many different contexts. But it's incredible what can be done these days with a bit of technology and a bit of forethought. I wonder if the Ukrainians are going to be looking at thinking, what can we learn from that? Anyway, that is just a bit of a rather random aside. Just go back to Kharkiv. Just worth noting these before and after photos that I think are often so effective when they actually render, which is not happening today. I'll tell you what, the internet's not being kind to me today. So here's Vovchansk up in the Kharkiv direction. So what it used to look like, beautiful. That's what it looks like now. It's absolute hellscape. And this is what liberation looks like. This is what freedom looks like in Russia. Absolutely horrendous, isn't it? The idea of like liberating a country. We liberate you by flattening your towns and cities and killing your civilians. That is true liberation. We're going to liberate you from life and order and structure and culture. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Take care and speak to you soon.